Morning, everyone. I wanted to begin today's Google Classroom assignment, which is going to obviously be a lecture on Chapter 2, by going through the test and quiz corrections format that I'm going to be using this year. And really, I should clarify that's just quiz corrections. I don't offer corrections on unit exams. But for quiz corrections, I do offer it sort of as an incentive to hopefully get you guys to say, hey, I didn't learn it the first time. I clearly got that question wrong, but if you're willing to give me back some points, I'm willing to go back and try and learn it a second time. And I'm willing to give those points in order to motivate and incentivize you guys to do that. The one thing I will say, let me sneeze, excuse me. The one thing I will say is that quiz corrections in my format do take a fair amount of time. You will get faster at them as you get more experienced in navigating the textbook and finding things quicker. But early on, they do take a while, and you only get a half point back for each doing them. So one of the things that I always like to encourage is sort of looking at things strategically or analytically and saying, I can either spend an hour and a half doing quiz corrections and only get half my points back, or I can spend that hour and a half before the quiz and studying and reviewing my notes, and I get full points for everything I get right then. So, it can be kind of a bad deal to spend your time on the back end, but either way, they're incredibly important for your grade. And those of you that do commit to doing quiz corrections for every quiz, I will tell you right now that if you do your homework and you do quiz corrections, it's pretty much mathematically impossible to get less than a B minus in my class. Um, so it is definitely your ticket to doing well. So with that in mind, let me just quickly go through the format. Quiz correction format. If you look here, basically all you're going to do is you're going to write what chapter quiz you're doing. In this case, it's a chapter 1. And any question you got wrong, you go here and you write the question number. Let's say it was number 5. You type out the full question. What was the name of the civilization? Da 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 da. Um, you write what your answer was. Maybe you wrote A, Sumeria, and then that question was clearly wrong. So you need to prove to me what the correct answer is. And it is not enough to simply say, well, you said in the lecture, Mr. Novak, or you in your notes, you had this. You need to use your textbook to go into the textbook and find what the correct answer is and prove it to me why. And this is the only way I'm giving points back. So your format needs to be, the answer is B because on page 62, paragraph 3, it says, and then type me out the quote that proves why the answer was B. Okay? Any question that you do that for, you will get a half point back. I will tell you that it's a wise mathematical move to always do your quiz corrections because even at a 20 out of 25, which is generally considered a pretty good score on a quiz, that's still an 80%, right? And so for the cost of 5 quiz correction, you can turn a B minus in the grade book in a category that is weighted at 30% of your overall grade. You can turn that B minus into an A minus for the price of 5 quiz corrections. So whether or not you get 15 wrong or 4 wrong, right, you should always do them. And if you do, like I said, it's pretty much mathematically impossible not to at least get a B minus, and they are definitely your ticket to an A. All right, so with that in mind, let's keep going and let's take a look at the chapter we're looking at this time. And so here it's actually chapter 2. I haven't renamed this lecture from the older edition of Strayer, but it's chapter 2 in dealing with first civilizations. And this map right here is really focusing on the big 4 that we are going to be spending a lot of time on this chapter. We definitely do look at Norte Chico in South America. We look at the Olmec in Central America or modern day Mexico, but these are the big 4. From left to right, we have purple is Egypt. We have Mesopotamia, sometimes referred to as Sumeria, in the Tigris and Euphrates River Valley in orange. We have in the pink the Indus River Valley civilization. Um, and then in the yellow, we have Shang China. So let's go ahead and define what exactly is a civilization. In chapter 1, we looked at the rise, not the peopling of the earth and human migration and Neolithic revolution, but we also looked at the rise of the first societies, right? The first organized societies. We had agricultural village societies, we had chiefdoms, we had pastoral societies. This is sort of the next step forward in the evolution of some of those societies. So, what is a civilization? First, if you were to ask a demographer or an anthropologist this question, you're going to get basically a very jargony sounding answer that basically says it is the most complex stage of human societal organization. And it cannot happen without the agricultural revolution, right? No matter whether you are farming or whether you're herding, that's all agriculture. And so civilization really can't happen without that, but it is the most complex stage of human societal organization. And so the other day, I gave you a do now where I had you asked you to list what sort of signs, if you were an archaeologist, would you be looking for in order to identify something as a civilization? And you actually gave a lot of the correct answers. And so I'm going to go kind of fast here, and you can pause if you need to. But essentially, you're going to see cities, the rise of cities. You generally don't see cities in just simple societies, but these cities can number over 10,000 plus people and are generally a good indication that a societal organization has progressed past simple society and into full-blown civilization. We also tend to see a centralized government. And a centralized government is really marked by a center, right? Like there in a centralized government, you have a center. You have a single leader that is sort of surrounded by support staff and outward and outward and outward, almost like a dartboard. But you generally see that style of government. You tend to see a written language, although this is not found in all full-blown civilizations, it is definitely found in most. We oftentimes see organized religion, whether that's the codifying of early Chinese belief systems, right, or sort of monotheistic belief systems coming out of the Mesopotamia region that progressed into Judaism and ultimately Christianity and Islam. But you generally see in a civilization organized religion emerge. We definitely are going to see different social and economic classes. Class hierarchy is a huge indicator of civilization, maybe not always for the better, but it always tends to be there, right? In a hierarchy, what shape are we thinking about? Give you some think time. What shape are we thinking about when I say the word hierarchy? We're thinking of that pyramid. Some people on the top, some people in the middle, some people on the bottom. These are class structures. We also tend to see pretty advanced art and architecture. We definitely see the specialization of labor, which we talked about in chapter 1, about how having a stable food supply and a surplus allowed people to no longer have to be committed to food production, that you could have some of your most brilliant or creative or spiritual members go forth and say, hey, we'll feed you. How about you just work with metal? We'll feed you. How about you continue doing this religious thing, or we'll feed you, and how about um you learn how to fix things, or you investigate like new inventions. We oftentimes do see large scale construction projects defining civilizations as well. And this is because in order to organize truly large scale construction projects, you have to be organized as a society to the extent that you generally don't see that in simple societies. Um, Oftentimes that involves in early civilization slavery, but the development of irrigation systems or large scale road construction, massive temple complexes are all good signs. And really, for our purpose in AP World History, we're going to look at the rise of civilization as it existed and arose independently in 6 major spots throughout the world. And I really want to highlight the word independently because, a lot of times we think of something that rises in one place and then sort of spreads out and then people learn and go. But what we actually saw was civilization, just like agriculture, sort of emerged independent of each other. There wasn't a lot of connection between these places. In most cases, there was none at all. And yet, in 6 different parts of the world, we had societies continue to progress to the point where they were starting to exhibit and show a lot of the characteristics we just went through. And so here are the 6, right? Some are going to be focused on more than others, particularly those. Let's start in the upper, well, let's start in the middle. The middle, right, where we see the names that some of you who may sometimes find yourself in church on a typical Sunday might recognize some of these names because they're Middle Eastern cities that show up a lot in the Old Testament. We see Nineveh, we see Babylon, we see Ur. This is the Mesopotamian societies. We're going to skip the middle one because we're really not going to be focusing too much on this Oxus civilization of Central Asia, but we will move to the right, upper right, which is Shang China, which becomes sort of the seed in China that grows into the great Chinese dynasties that we're really going to be focusing on probably more than any other civilization um, through the course of the year. Continuing down to the bottom right, we see um, in kind of the border of India and Pakistan, the Indus River Valley civilization, which is really defined by two large city-states. First one being one of the cooler named cities of all time. It sounds very Star Warsy to me, Mohenjo-Daru, and then Harappa. And then continuing forward, we have Egypt in the Nile River Valley. Obviously, our society is pretty familiar with Egypt from movies and books and National Geographic specials. South America in the bottom left is the Indian mountain civilization of Norte Chico, which continues, that's a seed that continues to grow into some of the great Andean mountain civilizations like terminating in the Inca. And then we have kind of up in modern day Mexico and the southern part of Mexico. I think that would be the state of, I want to say Zacatecas, but I don't know. But the Yucatan area, right? We have the Olmec civilization, which ultimately is a seed that grows into the Toltecs and then the Maya, and then Mayans influence development of the Aztec. And so we see these sort of civilizations progress over time. Here's just some visuals we can look at. Top left is kind of organized or written language. We see kind of more complex art emerge. But how did they get started? What do historians think, or archaeologists think, or anthropologists think about how civilizations really emerged? Well, we know that they relied on the agricultural revolution first and foremost. You don't get big cities, you don't get job specialization, you don't get all those changes to the human experience with a hunting and gathering society. We had to kind of settle down or build a herding system that allowed us a stable food supply in order to kind of put our ingenuity on advancement. And like I just said, I am kind of repeating myself that this surplus production allowed not only innovation to occur and job specialization, but really it allowed for human populations to start to actually climb. And from this specialization of jobs, we had the emergence of hierarchy, right? Like it didn't happen um, magically. Hierarchies emerged because you had some members of society, when not everyone is involved in food, you had some members of society that were looked at as more valuable to society than others. In this case, it might be on the low side of things, by like skilled tradesmen, like the blacksmith of your village, right? Or the religious shaman. But then we also had job specialization result in sort of the rise of a ruling class. Um, we know to that point with a ruling class that civilizations tended to emerge out of chiefdoms. Agricultural village societies were way too hold hands and sing kumbaya and everybody love each other. It didn't have that sort of grow and conquer and build that chiefdoms did. Chiefdoms with that sort of built-in inequality of a leader who could organize large-scale work projects. That's where we got the rise of civilizations because they possessed social rank and specialization needed for those irrigation projects and large-scale temple projects like in the pyramids and whatnot. Now, as I said to you last chapter, some of these societies were seeds, and some of them, just like with a garden, some of your seeds don't grow, right? Or they stay stunted and small. But some seeds do grow and thrive. And so not all the early chiefdoms became civilizations, but some certainly did. Now, I'm going to kind of gloss over this from a time perspective, but one of the popular anthropological theories on how civilizations got started is that basically human populations got to be so large that humans had to begin competing with each other because there was limited land and resources. And nothing makes people advance or makes people kind of more violent than having to compete for food. and this makes us creative.